Hey guys, Coach Pop here. So I'm assuming that you have already watched the John Green video in which he tries to make a case that the Renaissance wasn't even a thing. Uh, but the other issue that I want you to think about today is the Renaissance that takes place in Europe worthy of a position in the context of world history as a whole? There's only so much that you can include and if you recall, the example, which was in question number 4, suggested that maybe it shouldn't be in there because it didn't really have any effect outside of Europe. But I want to take a counter approach to that to suggest, to refute that claim and say that it should be a part of world history. But in order to do that, we're going to use this particular image, which is by a Renaissance painter. And if you notice the date, this is towards the end. He's in the northern part of Europe, which was certainly well after the Italian part. This is a painting called The Ambassadors, and the two ambassadors depicted there are described on your image, uh, Georges de Selve and Jean de Dentville. Uh, Obviously, the guy on the left is the one that commissions the painting. But you've got a worksheet. It would be the second page on either the Google document or the Word document to refer to this. And you're basically just taking notes there. But here's the first thing I want you to do. Looking at the image, which hopefully you've got the PDF open, you can look to. Hit pause here in just a second and list as many objects as you can on both the bottom shelf and the top shelf. Looking at the shelf, so here's the top shelf, here's the bottom shelf. How many of these things do you recognize? Hit pause and just take a moment to sort of list as many as you can. Don't worry if you don't understand what most of them are. Okay, so I'm hoping that you took the time to actually kind of see what most of those are, but let's take a close look at them together. First of all, on the lower shelf, a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, these might look like telescopes, perhaps. In point of fact, they are pipes that are a type of musical instrument. They would be added to bags to make bagpipes, for example. A musical instrument also up here is an early form of a guitar. And what's interesting about this is that is a version that came from the Middle East. And it is what will become the basis of what we know as the modern European guitar. This book right here is a hymnal book, I am told, by experts who can look at that image much more closely than I. Over here is another book, which is an ancient Greek text. The notion that it is an ancient Greek text is significant in the context of the Renaissance because, of course, the knowledge of the Greco-Roman world was largely lost to Western Europe and preserved within Dar al-Islam and then reintroduced into the European world as a consequence of the Crusades and increasing contact with the larger world. And then over here is a globe, and you can obviously see there's a handle that you can kind of spin that. But if we had to generalize what we have here, we've got like art and music and literature, and what we've got is like on the lower shelf is a kind of cultural um, milieu, if you will, a bunch of things from different parts of the world involving culture. If we look at the upper shelf, one thing to notice, first of all, is that cover that's on the upper shelf is a pattern that looks like it comes from Central Asia. And then we've got a whole bunch of scientific instruments. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know what some of these are. I know this is a form of astrolabe, which is, calculating position to the stars. This thing that looks like a globe is actually a way to predict what constellations would be seen in the sky at different parts of the year. I have no clue what these two instruments are, although they definitely look like they're for some sort of navigation. This that looks like a bunch of different clocks was an instrument that was used for trying to keep track of time as long maritime voyages were taking place. Obviously, they didn't have a way to do that, and so they would literally try to just keep as many different time as they could in a way to try to see where they were in especially in terms of if you're crossing the Atlantic and trying to figure out what time it is when you get to a certain point. The overall thing to note here, though, is that they are scientific instruments. And so what we see in the shelves that these two guys are leaning on, below we've got like the arts, and at the top we have the sciences. And again, this John Green mentioned this becomes the sort of basis for what we think of as the humanities. Now, take a moment and hit pause here to look at the curtain and the men's clothes. And look at what they're made of and try to imagine. Again, you're just taking notes here. You're not really answering the questions. Where do you think those come from? So hit pause, look at both of the guys' clothes specifically and the curtain in the background. What are those made of and where do you think they come from? Okay, so hopefully you've hit pause and had a chance to really sort of think that through. Uh, the biggest thing to notice is the guy on the left in particular, his one of his several undershirts is obviously made of silk, and of course we know silk originated in China. But he's also got this fur stool, and much of the fur at the time would have come from either Siberia or from North America. And again, the idea that he's drawing on these materials from all over the world is sort of at the heart of what my main point is going to be. If you look at the other guy, he does appear to have some fur as well, but this down here is actually felt. And felt was originally made by pressing animal hairs, the actual fibers from the fur, as opposed to leaving the skin part attached to make a pelt. So again, it's a notion that the materials for this really fine fabric, felt, is actually coming from other parts of the world, particularly Siberia and North America. And then if you look at the curtain in the background, it is a combination of both felt and silk. So again, the outfits that they are wearing, the luxury that they promote, and the obvious success of these guys is sort of the point of the picture, but they're drawing on materials that come from various parts of the world beyond just Europe. On the next question, though, I want you to hit pause here, take a look at the designs of the floor, and see what you can recognize about those designs. Hit pause and just take a moment to look at that. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to sort of look at that closely. Now you'll immediately recognize there's something weird in the foreground there, but what I want you to focus on right now are these designs, these sort of geometric designs. These come directly from Dar al-Islam. If you recall, for much of Islamic history, there was a taboo, a ban against human figures, and so these geographic designs become a hallmark of Islamic art. And so the very floor on which they're standing is from another region of the world. Um, but I don't know if you noticed this looking at the curtain again. On the top left, you can see this tiny little image, and that is a crucifix. And it's hiding behind the curtain. And then let's talk about what's going on here. If you can make that out, that is a skull. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to point out here. Unfortunately, I cannot do this via, some sort of electronic medium. If we were in class, though, if you have the image, and maybe you can do it in black and white, I'm not sure if you print it out, but one of the things that Renaissance artists are learning to use is the different aspects for things. And if you hold the image at a certain angle, the skull actually appears to be a 3D image. And again, I don't think it's possible to recreate this without actually being in class, but it's again, they're playing with the idea of perspective here. But then what the heck is the skull doing there? And why is a little crucifix peeking out? I think Holbein is making a point here that there's always this sort of aspect of religion in the background, but he's foregrounding humanity. And again, this is something we'll talk about tomorrow. A key feature I'm going to argue about the Renaissance is it's placing man, humans, at the center of inquiry. And that's an obvious thing that is a theme running throughout all of the Renaissance. But the suggestion here is that the Christianity, religion in general, is always kind of behind the scenes. So let's come to the fifth question here. What the heck does this have to do with anything? Well, on the one hand, you could argue that the Renaissance had few effects beyond Europe. But what about the causes? Because what I would suggest is going on here in this image is part of what causes this Renaissance is globalization. And I think that's reflected in the fact that in this image, we see so many different objects, whether they be for art or for science, the clothes, the designs, the fabric, all of these things are coming from different parts of the world. In other words, globalization creates the conditions that allow the Renaissance to happen. The world is a cause of the Renaissance as opposed to the effect. Try to summarize that in some way that makes sense to answer the fifth question on the other side of the sheet. Identify and explain one piece of evidence that refutes the claim that the Renaissance does not have a true place in this story of world history. In other words, using this image, how would you argue against the idea that we shouldn't study the Renaissance in a world history course? Give it your best shot. Again, it's a completion grade. It's just a way for me to check on where we are. Give it your best shot. Try to hit submit. I honestly don't know how that's going to go because it's spread out over what was classwork and homework. If you got a problem, just save the document. It's cool. We'll take care of it. I want to thank you for paying attention. A reminder for tomorrow's lesson in class, you will need to have your 6 different color highlighters with you. There's going to be a rather complex diagram you're going to have to do some stuff with. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and I appreciate you guys paying attention.